Hello. Today we're going to read this book by Jeannie Baker called Mirror. And this is a really uniquely designed book. When you open it up, there are kind of two books in one. One of them reads from left to right, which is the way that those of us who live in the western parts of the world, like Europe and America and Canada, our books are usually written like this. But if you live in some eastern parts of our world, such as the Middle East or parts of Asia, your books are written from both your words are written from left to right. I'm sorry, from right to left, and your pages you flip from left to right as well, and that's how you open your book. So let's read this. I'm going to read the English part over here, but it's translated in Arabic over on the other side. So there are two boys and two families in this book. One family lives in a city in Australia, and one lives in Morocco, North Africa. The lives of the two boys and their families look very different from each other, and they are different, but some things connect them, just as some things are the same for all families, no matter where they live. And I know we talk a lot about how different our families are. Even in those of us who live in the same city, they're different. And these are two folks that live in two different parts of the world. So in this first page, we notice a couple different things. Here, this child seems to live in a house that's made of wood, like a metal roof maybe, and it also seems like maybe they live in a city with lots of buildings and lots of cars, and there's a big giant bridge and like a crane. Oh, you can see it, a crane over here. And then over on this side, we don't see the kid yet, but we see a light on, and this house appears to be made out of stone or clay, perhaps, earth of some kind. And we see kind of a night sky, so it's still really early in the morning, where here it looks like it's daytime already. And we see a woman praying on her prayer rug, and then she's also in front of this giant loom making a rug. And so this is a very different, it looks like they live maybe kind of out in the country or out in the desert. And when we flip the page, you can see even more that this family seems to live where there aren't a lot of other houses. Now, one thing I just want to stop and point out here is that there are a lot of places in Morocco. There are big cities that look just like this with lots of traffic and cars, buildings. But this author of this story, the author and illustrator from this story, and I'm not sure why, has chosen to show us parts of Morocco that are very sparsely populated and have lots of mountains and deserts. And I'm a little concerned that she's chosen to do that just because this is what we call a common stereotype. When we see images from the Middle East, a lot of times the first thing we think of is perhaps that it's camels and desert and people that are living very simply, and we don't think of them necessarily as having big cities and cars and living much more similarly to how we do. So that's a question I wish I could ask Jeannie Baker, is why she chose to make these two look so different, or why she didn't maybe choose to show a kid from Australia that lived out in the desert, because there are lots of deserts in Australia that she could have shown, but she didn't, and that is something we'll have to ask her another day. So as we go through this book, we see that the kid and the dad go to a big store together, and we see that this boy and his father ride their donkey very far distance through mountains and valleys until they get to where there are a lot of other people, again with lots of donkeys and not cars, which again seems there's a few vehicles over here, but not very many. And again, that strikes me as unusual, that there would be a place where there would be so few cars or trucks in Morocco, and I'm worried about the stereotypes of that perpetuates. But we will continue reading to see. It looks like they brought the rug that they that the boy's mother was weaving at the very beginning. And then here's their marketplace where everybody has stalls. And this is really common throughout all parts of the world, including, if you ever go to farmers markets here in Ann Arbor or Ipsy, you'll see people with stalls set up and they'll be selling their wares. Whereas this kid is going not to an outdoor market that he maybe could have, but instead he's going to a big box store and is buying a bunch of material for his family's home. But then on the way home, he and his dad stop by this rug shop. Now this is another thing. This rug shop is called Magic Carpets, and that also really makes me pause because Magic Carpets is another kind of stereotype that has been perpetuated. If you've ever seen the movie Aladdin, where there's this thought that in Arab or the Middle East that people can have the carpets are magical and you can ride around on them.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And that's not really true. You can't really do that, but it's interesting to me that this store in Australia is called Magic Carpets and that he's not worried that that's, again, stereotypical and not really accurate. But he sells a lot of these rugs that apparently, including this one that was woven by the mom in Morocco. So eventually, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. The kid and his dad go back home, and again, they live in a very rural area here with fields and not really any cars at all, whereas this kid goes home with building supplies and their new rug, and this ends with the kid in Australia eating dinner with his family and unpacking this beautiful rug for their home that they seem to be working on. And then it shows a picture of him that he drew of him and his family flying on a magic carpet, this carpet that they just bought over Morocco. And again, I'm like, wow, Jeannie, what are you doing here? On the one hand, it seems like she wants to show the connection that this family has with this family that lives very differently in Morocco and the conditions that they live in and how they sell their rugs and how they have to, ride on their donkey really far distance to sell their rugs. And then they use the money that they buy from selling their rugs to get a computer to set up at their house. And they're using their computer not to do something fanciful and magical, but to look at Google Earth together, which seems which is just interesting. So they're looking at the realistic version of the Earth, whereas this kid in Australia has come up with this really kind of fanciful and continues to, stereotype the Middle East as a place full of magic carpets and deserts. And palm trees and camels. So that is a book that I have a lot of questions about, and I wonder now what we could do. Do you think we should write a letter to Jeannie and ask her why she made these choices? What sounds like the right thing to do to kind of ask all of our questions that we have about why she decided to write this book and why she decided to present these two cultures the way that she did? So in this read aloud, I tried to model for you all the NICE strategy, the observing, the asking questions, the thinking critically and investigating, and then finally engaging. And once we sort of challenge things, to think about how we could engage and push back on the stereotypes that we see in this book.